When you're on an IFR flight, it's possible to ask ATC for a shortcut to get to your destination quicker. Here we're flying between Monmouth Executive Airport in New Jersey and Leesburg, Virginia. IFR flights in busy airspace like here in the Northeast typically involve longer routes. Rather than flying straight to Leesburg, we're being routed to the north of Philadelphia's Class Bravo airspace by going direct between the Robbinsville VOR RBV and the Yardley VOR ARD, then to the Pottstown VOR PTW. Even from there, we don't go directly to Leesburg, instead proceeding first to the Westminster VOR EMI. In our Cirrus, that route is going to have us about an hour out from our destination from here. We'd love to go as direct as possible, so we can ask ATC. We're currently talking to New York Approach. Approach Cirrus 518 Foxtrot Tango, any chance of getting a direct routing to our destination? November 8 Foxtrot Tango, you can make that request with the next sector. So what that means is that New York can't clear us direct to our destination. The reason is most likely because a direct route would cut right through Philadelphia International's arrival and departure airspace. New York Approach isn't able to coordinate that, but Philadelphia might. Later on in the flight, we're handed off to Philly Approach and make the same request. Cirrus 518 Foxtrot Tango, request direct Leesburg. November 8 Foxtrot Tango, proceed direct Westminster. So we were given direct to the VOR identifier EMI. Our current ETE is 56 minutes. The direct routing updates us to 55 minutes. Was it worth it? Every bit of fuel saved is important, but the difference is pretty negligible in this instance. Meanwhile, we weren't given direct to our destination, but instead to Westminster, because as before, Philadelphia isn't able to clear us through another control facility's busy airspace. In this case, going direct destination would put us close to Baltimore's Bravo, and the next sector, Potomac Approach, is in charge of that. Going to the Westminster VOR instead keeps us clear of that. So what about those negligible time savings? Cutting the corner like we did and going direct to Westminster certainly looks a lot shorter than the original route when you eyeball it, but it only cuts off 5 or so miles and saves about a minute. Turns out, going direct may not save you as much time and fuel as you might think. Let's take a generic example. We're planning a 100-mile flight between airports. We file our flight plan and are dismayed to get a routing that looks like this, taking us well off the direct route. It includes an intermediate waypoint at the midpoint of the trip. The first leg takes us 30 degrees west of the direct-to-destination track, and the second leg goes direct to destination, also a 30-degree offset from the direct route. This looks like a real detour, but let's run some numbers and compare. Both of these legs are around 57.7 miles, which combine to make our total trip just over 115 miles. Compare that with the direct route, which is 100 miles, and we've added only 15 more miles, or a 15% longer trip. Flying at 100 knots ground speed, significantly slower than we were in our Cirrus, this makes what would have been a 1-hour direct flight a slightly longer hour and 9-minute ordeal. Really not as bad as it looks. On the one hand, this makes the extra work of the controllers and you coordinating a direct routing seem less worthwhile. Any amount of fuel you save is valuable, of course, but I'd argue that if an extra 9 minutes of fuel endurance is critical, you might want to consider an intermediate fuel stop. Another way to look at this is the value of a deviation. Let's say you're flying this flight VFR, planning a direct route without the intervention of ATC. There's a nasty looking bit of weather on the route though. Or maybe there's a body of water you'd rather not cross. You could deviate around it as we've shown and not suffer much of a time penalty. If we stretch this example out from a 30-degree to a 45-degree deviation, then it's a bit of a different story. Here, the two legs become 70.7 miles each, a total of 141. Compare that to the original 100-mile direct route, we've increased our flight by 41%. At 100 knots ground speed, the 1-hour flight stretches to over an hour and 20 minutes. These out and back style deviations are extreme examples. Let's go back to our original flight. When we finally got a clearance to go direct to the Westminster VOR, we went from following a track at 291 degrees to a direct track of 261 degrees. Like we said, it netted us only a savings of about a minute, and we spent a good deal of brainpower coordinating with the different controllers. Now, a large part of the reason for this is by the time we got our direct routing, we were already really close to the point we'd be turning to Westminster anyways. That 30-degree shortcut would have saved us more time had we gotten it back over the Robbinsville VOR, but as we saw, New York wasn't able to accommodate us that far back. The takeaway here isn't to never ask for or reject direct routing when available. After all, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. But it's to temper your expectations on what a direct routing can actually get you, and to understand the mechanics of why you may not be able to get such an amendment, or if you do, it might be later on in the route, and it may not save you very much time at all. Also, in the case of weather along the direct route, don't ignore the option to deviate around simply because you don't want to waste the time. Run the numbers. It may not be as big an inconvenience as you first think.